Welcome back to Open Heart Conversations, where we get together with spiritual leaders, teachers, philosophers, and discover and explore their journey. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Jose Miguel Roman, and with me is Reverend Renee.
Good morning. Hello, Jose.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here with you today.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. Reverend Renee Rossi happens to be our executive producer. And with us today is a very, very dear friend, a young man that I met many years ago when he was a seminarian and I was dean at a seminary that he was studying at. We became close friends. I became a real admirer of his work, of his spirituality, and above all, the human being he happens to be. And so I'd like to welcome here to the stage at the United Palace, my dear friend, Reverend Alex Reegan.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you for having me. As usual, I love to participate with everything United Palace has going on. And Reverend Renee, thank you. It's so lovely to meet you in person.
Yes,
We've
finally.
been doing so many Zoom meetings over the last few years, and I'm so happy to be back in person. So thank you for having me here.
Well, we're very, very, very happy to have you. Reverend Alex will soon have a book coming out, published by the prestigious Hay House, entitled, tell us that title.
The title is What Needs to Be Said, Speak Your Truth, Release Shame, Find Oneness. And it comes out on May 2nd, and pre-orders are actually going to be opening up this week. So I'm really excited about it.
That's fantastic. And that really will lead me to my very first question, Alex, because it's central to that remarkable work, which I've had the opportunity now to go through. Tell us a little bit about your journey, your life journey. Where did it all begin?
Where did it begin? Well, I guess, my origin story kind of traces back to I grew up in a very evangelical, pretty fundamentalist family and household and community. It wasn't necessarily an evangelical or fundamentalist church per se, but my family was pretty evangelical. So this is what I looked like as a child, if that gives you a little indication of, I was assigned female at birth, and I knew I was queer, knew I was different, knew I stood out like a sore thumb in my family and in my community, but I sort of kind of didn't know what to do with that or how I could really even survive, honestly, that situation, because I knew from a very young age, like, there's one right way to do things, and how you even look and act is not the right way that we want you to do things. So it was a struggle for a lot of my growing up years because I loved church, I loved God, I loved Jesus. My parents once brought me to New York City when I was probably maybe 7 or 8, and I was walking down the street and I saw one of the street corner preachers like on the soapbox, and I literally stopped and talked to this guy for like 10 minutes. They had to drag me away like we were going to a show. They're like, honey, we don't have time for this. But I just loved to talk about God and Jesus. So in the struggle of coming to terms with who I was, my queerness at that time, because I didn't understand or have the words for transgender or any of those things as a child, certainly not in the 80s and where I was growing up. So I just really struggled to find a way to balance who I knew I was in my heart and in my soul with what my community and my family needed me to be. And it was a long journey for sure.
And that gender experience is central to what you have to say in that book. And so tell us a little bit about your gender experience. What was it like for you as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult?
So when I was about 6 years old, I was playing out in the yard with my brother and two of our friends who were also boys. And it was hot. It was the summertime. So we turned on the hose and threw our shirts off and we're running through the yard. And my mother came like running out from inside the house like, you have to put your shirt on. Girls can't go outside without their shirts on. And I was like, we don't look any different from each other. And that was sort of the first moment where I felt very confused. Like, this doesn't seem to match up with what I feel and what they're saying. I couldn't put more to that at that time, but I kind of know that I just stored that in my brain somewhere. Like, this is a little bit weird. And I think that just began to happen as I got older. By the time I hit puberty and that range, it was like I was definitely attracted to the women. Like, I was attracted to my friends that I knew or other people that I knew that were girls and identified as girls and were assigned female at birth. And I just then knew, oh God, this is really bad. Like this is not supposed to be what's happening. So all of it was kind of this, underlying feeling of I'm going to get into trouble with this. Like this is going to backfire. This is going to end poorly. I tell a story in the book about my mom. When I was about 12 or 13, my mom's friend, their son was dying of AIDS, and they came to our house for dinner. And my parents were very cagey, don't touch anything he touches, he's sick. It was a very fear-filled, and they sent me downstairs, which they never did. They never sent us away. And I heard my mom telling him he was going to burn in hell. He needed to repent for being gay. This was sort of his punishment. And I remember just wanting to run up the stairs and just save him from her. And I realized that who I wanted to save was myself. Because in that moment, it was something clicked inside of me that I knew I could never be me and keep all of this, or I'll have to sacrifice me to keep all of this. And it was the first real, this is the rock and a hard place where I'll never, I'm sort of screwed, and I knew that as a preteen.
That's extraordinary, because what you're literally saying is the choice was between yourself, saving yourself, or saving family and faith and community and everything, if you will, that we have at that moment. It was either you or everything else.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
that was the choice you were left with.
Yeah, definitely.
Really difficult.
Really difficult, yeah. And it definitely informed that next decade of my life before I actually did come out as queer to my parents in my early 20s. Because it was always this, no, I have to push this away, and it came to the point where it almost felt like it was killing me, where I was going to die if I just didn't choose me. And so I did, and, there was quite a aftermath in the wake of that, for sure.
This moment that you're talking about, which, lasted a long time, this rock in a hard place and the struggle, how did this affect your spirituality at the time?
At the time, it's weird because I think I tried to really compartmentalize myself in a way because I didn't want to give up the community that I had. All of my closest friends, for the most part, were friends from church and that community. Like I said, I really loved God. I really believed. So there was a lot of time I spent even sort of praying to be sort of saved from it, from myself, to be sort of healed from being queer. And so it was a very, there was a lot of sort of loving myself and hating myself all in this simultaneous motion. And it was very, I think that's what led to a lot of the later in life chronic illnesses that I've had, because it was sort of like I was living on both sides of the same coin, and I wasn't just in alignment with loving myself and supporting myself because I didn't know how to be. I didn't know how I could justify that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You speak about the God within, and I'm wondering if you could talk about, how you came to this idea and what it means.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, when I was at seminary with Jose, I realized that I didn't even want to still use the word God. Most of my 20s and 30s, once I came out, I sort of just got rid of God altogether in my life, or at least I thought I did. I thought, this is it. I'm done with it. I hate God. I'm an atheist. There's nothing in the world, We're just stuck here on our own. There's no support, no nothing. And so by the time I got to seminary, I still felt antsy about even using the word God. And so throughout the book, I actually use God in lowercase g. I never uppercase God and capitalize it, because I decided that God has so many connotations of someone who owns that God, whether it's the Christian faith, the Catholic faith, Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever the words are, we always have this is our God, and we sort of own it. And so I decided to start lowercase using God, and that helped me begin to say, this is the God I identify with. And I don't have to necessarily identify with your God or her God or whoever's God. And then I began to realize what I was searching for all along was inside of me. It wasn't this God on a cloud in the sky with a beard who looks like Santa Claus, which is who I had been taught to look for. It was inside of me. All of the love, all of the connection, all of the oneness, all of that beingness was within me all along. And so I decided to start referring to it as the God within, because that helped to remind me to stop looking out there externally from myself, but to remember to reconnect in here.
Sounds like a healing journey. It sounds
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. It really was.
Can you speak about the moment, of hitting rock bottom, or moments plural, perhaps?
Yes. Yes, I had a kind of a funny line in my book where I talk about, it's not that the time before wasn't rock bottom. I think it's just sometimes it goes deeper than where we were the last time we've hit rock bottom. So I feel like I've had quite a few rock bottoms in my experience, both in the physical world, like from addiction or, the things with my family, but also I have had like spiritual rock bottoms where I just realized I can't any longer do the things I've been doing in the way I've been doing them. Like I have to go a different direction. So, I spent quite a few years just addicted to not just weed and things like that, but food, people, things I just was kind of trying to always just take in more, get more, fill up, because I just felt like a sieve that it was just leaking right back out of. And the funny thing is, a lot of the things helped me at first. When I started smoking weed at first, it helped me a ton. I was like, my anxiety was better. I mean, before that, I was almost getting to a point where I was like agoraphobic because I was just so afraid of the world. I just didn't even want to be out there anymore. And so at first, it was a very good tool for me. It really helped me. It helped a lot of the chronic illnesses and aches and pains that I've had over the years. And then it became a crutch, and it became something that it was like I couldn't go without. I didn't know how to travel. I didn't want to go to work where I had to be sober. I didn't want to do the things where I had to be in the regular world without that. And I started to realize that's a problem, but it took, a really bad mouth infection that I had where I literally ended up in an oral surgeon's office, and he had on the paper in huge font, "You cannot smoke for 2 weeks after this surgery." And I almost walked out of the surgeon's office. And 2 nights before that, I had literally fainted from the pain. And I still almost walked out because I didn't want to give it up. And it was like then that I knew, okay, like I've hit a rock bottom here. And then it went deeper as I got sober and, went into that. The rock bottom got definitely deeper and deeper for sure.
Do you feel that obviously hitting rock bottom is a moment of change, right? It's this moment where you're kind of being invited to transform your life.
Definitely.
Right? Do you feel that a person has to hit rock bottom to hit that moment of transformation? Or can a person really hit that moment of transformation without that level of trauma that rock bottom seems to suggest?
That's a great question. I actually don't think we probably all have to hit rock bottom because I've seen a lot of people who have changed their life and just kind of made a turnaround and just decided, oh, I need to do things differently. And since then, I've done that in ways where it didn't take getting to the rock bottom. And maybe that was part of the learned nature of having been to rock bottom. So maybe there is some advantage to that in a way because I learned to use it as a tool. Like now I see when I'm headed in that direction. Like I know, oh, this is where this leads. I don't have to go that far before I decide to make the shift. But yeah, I don't know that everybody has to go through that. I think it's a good catalyst for change. When you get to the point where it's like, it's similar to that rock in a hard place. I had to come up with an entirely new way because the 2 ways forward they weren't plausible. It wasn't going to work. So I had to just create a whole new way. So I think that's part of it too, is just that choice that we can see beyond these rules of this is the one right way and make a whole new way for ourselves. And maybe that's the trick.
When you look at these experiences you had, which we're referring to as rock bottom, right?
Yeah.
What do you think was among the greatest lessons that you learned about yourself?
That I was like more vast and stronger and more capable than I ever imagined myself to be. Like in all of the, one of the lines I say in the book is that I have like crawled, scratched, clawed my way through this life. And I always for a long time saw that as a bad thing. And after all of this sort of coming through now to the other side, I just see that as like, that was the tenacious, like just, I'm not going to give up on this. Like I won't give you all the satisfaction of me giving up on this. Because so many times I could have just given up. I could have just given in. Whether that means to not living anymore or it just means to okay, I'll just follow the rules that you want me to live by. Because time and again, society, my parents, the church, it's a long list of people who have wanted me to live by their rules and do the way they want me to do things. So
I think it's really profound. And when we began to prepare for this conversation, Renee did a magnificent job at kind of exploring things we could go into. She was the person who suggested this line of questioning, and it really challenged me because I asked myself, how about in my life, And I came to the realization that they're almost like two experiences of rock bottom. I'm not suggesting they're the only experiences, there are many. One is the experience of, it's almost like the addiction experience where you kind of realize that you're living a life that is so much smaller than who you really are.
Amen to
right?
that. Yep.
Living a life where you're kind of destroying your immensity.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's either you're living a life that's too much smaller, or the other rock bottom is when you realize it's a totally internal, where your ideas of who you are or what life is infinitely smaller than you really are.
Yes.
Right?
Amen to that, both of them.
So that rock bottom for me is always this, exactly as you said, Alex, it's always kind of this moment of, and it is an almost tragic moment, right?
Yep.
Where you realize, ironically, that whatever it is that's in your head or in your life, it's not worthy of you.
No.
You're so much bigger than that.
Definitely. Definitely. And the funny part is that really happened with my family and the way society wanted me to be as well, because I realized I am infinitely more grand than how they saw me and who they wanted me to be.
Right.
And it made them afraid. It made them afraid.
Right.
And so I don't have to take that on. I don't have to own that. That's their fear. And that took me, decades to get to that place where I could realize this isn't mine to carry.
Right. I've come to realize, though, that the fear is not the fear of you. It's the fear, what you represent is their need to grow.
100%.
And they're scared of having to let go of their belief systems, and they're scared of growing because even they are bigger than what they realize. And it's kind of, that's the tragedy, right?
It's the biggest tragedy of all of it. I mean, I think right now we're in this era of this anti-transness, now all this anti-drag, all this. And I think the deepest root of that is exactly that. They're not afraid of us. They are afraid of what we represent, which is freedom.
Correct.
I don't live by the binary rules of your world and your life, and that scares the ever-living daylights out of them, because the truth is they feel like they've wasted most of their lives living and following these rules that they have felt bound by and confined by, and they're jealous that someone else has the capacity to say, enough. Right. I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to be free and express myself however I desire to. And that's scary for people who have stayed buttoned up and in the rules and on that one right path.
And yet, what's funny is that that's the core of practically every spirituality on the face of the earth.
It certainly is.
Right?
Yep.
It's the path of the unknown.
Yep.
Where at the end is transformation.
Exactly.
Right? And every single faith at its deepest core is kind of inviting us into that.
Yes.
And yet in the name of that, some people would literally devalue not only us, but themselves.
Exactly. 1,000% true.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
Which I think is, your book, What Needs to Be Said, as I was going through it, I kept thinking the deepest thing that needs to be said is we are so much more than anything that can be said about us.
Yes.
Than anything we can say about ourselves.
Yep. Than anything we can even imagine. I mean, it's bigger than that. It's all so much bigger than our imagination, than like these small versions of ourselves that are bottled up in this body. We think this is all that we are. We think this is it. This is the thing. No, this is just like a thing that's happening. It's like a movie playing on the screen. We're just part of the movie. We're part of the experience, but we think this is the whole of who we are. And that's the mistake that we made, because we're so much more vast, bigger, more infinite than any of this. And maybe that's what scares all of us, is that we're bigger than this and we don't act like it.
Correct. What I find, though, is that in my own journey, that to get there, part of it was embracing all of this.
Yes.
Embracing what it means for me
Yeah.
to be Latino, to be a man, to be queer, to be from the South Bronx, which I celebrate, to be the son of Carmen Luisa, to be all that I am. I had to embrace it,
Right.
love it, celebrate it,
Right.
and realize that I was always this
Yeah.
and.
And so much more.
Right.
100%. I mean, I can't agree with that more, because that's what I really had to come to myself, was that this is okay to be exactly who I am. I can look and be whoever I am in this world, and it doesn't matter. And that's okay. It's okay to be trans. It's okay to go by he and him, even though loads of people have such a problem with it. I've struggled with so many people who refuse to call me he and him, who refuse to call me Alex, and I've just realized that has nothing to do with me. That's not my journey. That's their journey to figure that out.
Absolutely correct.
But I have come to terms with owning who I am and living fully in that place. And I think you're exactly right. When you do that, it opens the doorway for you to move beyond that then, for you to then see, what else am I?
Correct.
What else am I? Am I spirit? Am I energy? Am I oneness? Am I wholeness? Am I allness? And yeah, we are. We are all of that.
Right. We are this and.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. That's a beautiful way to put it.
Alex, that makes me curious about your story in the context of relationships, like having this self-awareness of all that you are, that you can't even imagine, and knowing that you don't have to carry the expectations of your community or your church or your family. So what was the role in community while you were having these realizations and you were going through this deep transformation?
Yeah, I mean, it changed as it kind of went along. In my early years of sort of like after coming out, and after that initial almost 7 to 10 years of I hate God, I don't want anything to do with this, I started with a couple of friends exploring other modalities of spirituality, like things like, channeling, like Abraham Hicks. One of my friends said, listen to this. I was like, what is this? I've never heard, what's a channeler? And part of my mind went like, ooh, my mom would think this is from the devil. Like I had this moment, and then I went, bring it on. Like there was this part of me that realized anything that she thought was going to be negative and the devil, I wanted to like just soak it up. So I started like looking into astrology and tarot and like the Akashic records and all of these different things. And all of a sudden, I think that's what really opened me up to say, oh, there's this whole other world and way to God. There's this whole other way. And so as that evolved, I found new friends and people who were in those, realms of like interest. And then that began to evolve into some different communities physically, where it was like a spiritual center that I went to. That later evolved to seminary, where I found people who believed in all sorts of different ways to get to God, that it wasn't just the very standard seminary, Christian God. So it's interesting how that evolved from community was such an important part of my life, which I then drastically just like lost, in an instant. And then the new community I began to build was like mine. It wasn't like this pre-built community that I was sort of born into. Like this was all painstakingly built by me and my own work and the work of the people around me who really were doing the same type of spiritual work and wanting to grow and expand and evolve. And I began to find like, oh, there's so many more people out here doing this work than I really ever realized. Like I don't have to be alone in this. And I think that's what changed, because, one of the things I talk about in, religious trauma spaces is religious trauma is created in community. Because like when I was in church, they were saying, no, gay people are going to hell, all these different things. And I was like, oh my God, does that mean I'm going to hell? And it caused this like break within me. But we rarely fix religious trauma from within community. We're usually left on our own to go to therapy or other things to try to help ourselves heal from religious trauma. And I think there's something to be said about creating space that can heal some of that, and that where we can come back together on the other side of traditional church in order to help ourselves and each other heal from those pains that all of that caused.
So can you speak more about, this idea that these new communities, it sort of came out of a place of pain, like you were suffering, you were seeking, and then it's almost like you were rewarded. I don't want to say that has to happen. I just want to say, what is the gift in your story, in this part of your life?
I think the funny part of that is, and I actually use this as one of the practices in the book, which is, and it's kind of like what I did with my parents. So, my mom would say anything that wasn't Jesus was from the devil, like that was just like, we knew that. I remember in high school once, I didn't want to play the team across town that had their mascot was the Devils, because I just thought it was like bad, to play, like, why did they name that? I really bought into my parents' beliefs around that. And so in that moment when my friend mentioned like channeling to me, I was like, oh, this is the opposite of what my mom taught. So I'm going to do that. And so while, yes, it was born out of pain, when I changed from following the suffering path of trying to be who they needed me to be, and I did the opposite, it led me towards my own path. It led me towards what I was looking for, and what grew out of all of that was, sitting here right now today and having a book come out in a few weeks. So I think it looks like the suffering and the pain brought us that, but I think that's also transformation, when you were saying that. I mean, transformation, think about how they make, metal. They use the hottest heat to mold metal. They don't just use like a little mild, tiny heat and then they like banging it. It's like the hottest heat and the fires of like the, depths of the earth. And that's how transformation happens at the earth level. The same is true for us. We just, we don't want to go into that sometimes. We think like, oh God, this is terrifying. But usually if we find a way into that, we can find a way out of it as well.
I know that Renee has a few questions for you, but I do want to, there's something that you said, and I want us to explore another side to it, which is that this journey you went through was certainly a very personal journey, right? And it brought you here, and the book, but it also made you a remarkable man. I mean, Alex, I know you. And I know that you've even paid a price, even in the seminary where you were at, because you always seek the truth. You always seek to hold yourself and others accountable to the truth. You're someone who I've also seen minister to people and really serve others. So the remarkable thing about this journey was that it wasn't simply a journey of personal exploration and personal self-affirmation. It's also turned into a journey of deep service to the world. Definitely. I mean, you're the kind of man, if I had a son, I'd want him to be you, and I mean that. I mean, you're the kind of human being, a kind of man that one admires. And so it also made that kind of come into being, right?
Definitely.
A really difficult journey, a journey of enormous pain and suffering, let's be really honest. And yet here you are now, someone who is, as our Jewish brothers and sisters says, Tikkun Olam, you're healing a broken world.
Well, thank you for saying all that. That means a lot to me, from you especially. But yes, I guess the funny part is a lot of my upbringing from what I was taught through Christianity was about service.
Right.
Was about loving your neighbor as yourself. And the irony is, my parents are spectacular humans in that way. They always are taking someone in, helping someone at their church, someone who needs something that they have or that they can do. And they did show me to be that kind of person. And, it would have been easy for me to say, forget that. Based on what I came through. It would have been easy for me to say, I'm not going to help anybody else. I don't want to do this, because I went through a lot of trauma and a lot of rejection and a lot of pain and suffering. But what I have learned is that every time I come back into that space, seeking oneness and connection with another person or a group of people, I feel God. That's where I feel that God within the most deeply, is within that communion with one another and with helping each other, because I think, it, like they say, it takes a village.
Right.
We can't do this on our own. We can't. We just can't. It takes all of us working together to make this world, to heal the broken world. And so I appreciate you saying that, because I do, try to, humbly work hard in this world to be a better man every day that I can.
Right. May I and it's really interesting, because again, you've said something that I think is really profound when you just spoke of your parents and their tradition, deeply grounded in a Christian faith, deeply grounded in an understanding of Christ, that also has this remarkably beautiful, wise, transformative element to it, right? Serve others, be present to others, love the world. And you also experience that.
Definitely.
If only they realized, this is my words, you tell me what yours are.
Yeah.
that the revelation didn't stop 20 years ago or 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, but that the revelation continues. If they only understood that and were able to open their heart to that reality, that that revelation now needs to grow and expand and deepen in ways they could never have imagined,
Yes.
they can save all that's beautiful and really expand it. And in many ways, gently allow that which needs to ebb into history, and that's the fear, right?
Yeah.
That's the fear that keeps
Definitely.
many of us,
Definitely.
frankly, not just your parents, but many of us from growing.
Totally. Yeah, for sure.
Would you agree?
I definitely agree. And I think also it's about, sometimes, unfortunately, the door of that service and love your neighbor as yourself, it has an end point, right? Because it's too hard or too scary to love beyond their comfort zones. So it was much easier to help, a single mother at their church who needed after school daycare than it was for them to help that young man who was gay, who was dying of AIDS on our couch.
Right.
It was much easier to say, wait, no, this is the other. This is sort of outside of the purview. Right. And, the irony of the message of Jesus is there was nothing outside of the lines. There was no one that could be outside of that love. And that's always made me the most sad because it's such a missed opportunity. I love those parents I have some friends who the parents are still, identified as Christian, but they're like the ones who are like welcoming all the gay kids into their house and welcoming all the trans. And that's like such a fun space to be in because it's like, you got it. Like, you got the message. It clicked for you. And that's one of the sad things for me. That's one of the heartbreaking places still in my heart is that my parents missed everyone. Todo el mundo. They missed that.
Mundo.
They missed that part. Yeah.
Alex, what would you say to another young person whose journey is similar to yours, someone who is struggling with not being accepted by their family, society, their church, or someone experiencing religious trauma, as you spoke of? Like, what could you say to them to encourage them?
The young part is the hard part, right? Because, when you're in the house of your parents or whoever your guardians are, you do have to follow some of their rules and you do have to stick by some of the things in order to sometimes make yourself safe, in order to be able to have food on your table, a roof over your head, clothing on your back. First I would say is, even if your family isn't that safe space, to reach out and find those safe spaces because they are out there and they do exist. And it might be a friend, it might be someone at school, it might be a teacher that you can talk to. But for me, I had this one family who later in college in my 20s, I found out, my friend told me, oh, my parents are so proud of you that you came out. And my response was, why the hell didn't you guys tell me that then? Because I would have had someone in high school that I could have talked to. And I didn't know. I had no idea that's how they would react because I just assumed everyone's going to react badly. So reach out safely if you can. I mean, thank God. I mean, now there's the internet. There's so many more resources. There are LGBTQ centers in almost probably every city across the country. So reach out, ask for help from safe identified places. And then the second step is to if you can choose not to just turn it all off and close it all off, because that was the one thing that I wish I could have done differently. And maybe I couldn't have, maybe I needed to go into that pathway. Maybe that's what led me to this sort of exponential growth that I found. But if you don't have to close yourself off, don't. If you don't have to just seal the door and just be like, I'm done with all of it. I hate them all, because the one thing I found is if I say to my parents, oh, I'm going to cut you off, I'm not going to be in your life because you can't call me Alex or you can't call me he or your son, I'm no different than them, because they also need me to be someone different so that they feel okay. And I think we spend such an extraordinary amount of our time sort of saying I'm either way better than someone or way worse than someone. And the answer is to actually find a space of neutrality, that I am neither better or worse, and you are neither better or worse. And to try to exist somewhere in that balance place instead of I need the world, I need everyone else to look like this certain way so that I feel better, because there's a big spoiler alert in that it won't happen. You won't get to that place, because you're never going to get everyone out there. There's like 7 billion some plus of us now. It's just, you're not going to get to that place. But you can do the work inside of you. And that's the other thing. Get into therapy, get into counseling of some sort, even if it's, a school counselor, someone that you can talk to, because you can't carry it all yourself. That's what's leading to the high suicide rates among our LGBTQ kids, is there's not enough support for people to get into and access to, like, letting go of the stigma even still about mental health, and that we want to, we need to socially, again, come together. We can't just do this on our own. It's a community. So, yeah, that's what I would try to say.
Thank you. Thank you for all of that. And for our listeners and our viewers, we are going to provide some resources in the show notes for anyone who's seeking that kind of support.
That's great. Thank you, guys.
You've begun to already kind of hint at the answer to my question, and that is, I don't want to minimize. You struggled. You had a really profound, complex journey of deep pain and suffering that could have at any point destroyed you.
Definitely.
But you made it through. And spirituality was a part of that.
Definitely.
Can you speak a little bit to how spirituality did, in fact, inform and assist and help you through that journey?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is because I was so identified with loving God and everything as a child, because I was just so like, oh, this is great. I remember being like 6 or 7, getting home from vacation Bible school and be like, Jesus died for us. Like, I just thought that was the most amazing thing, And so losing that was like the bigger pain than losing my family in a way. Like, when I decided I hate God, I'm done with it, I renounced Christianity, I was like, I'm none of it. That was the biggest pain of my life, because it felt like I was losing my beloved, And so finding those new forms of spirituality that enabled me to get back in touch, like as I began to meditate, as I began to do different readings, I started to have Akashic readings, I started to have other energy healers work with me, I started to go to a shaman, I started to go to all these different, and it was like every step along the way, even though, you might say like, well, weren't you like skeptical of all of that stuff? Like, I wasn't for one moment. Like, it felt so the opposite of what my upbringing had instilled at me, that it just felt free. And I just believed I'd have Akashic reading, and the woman would tell me things that felt like in my soul. I was like, how could she even know that? And I just knew that it was all the right path. And so I think every step I took, it just kept feeling more and more right for me. Like, I was finding my own compass again. I was finding my own guidance system, which they had, so beat out of me, to be like, that is not the right compass. Don't follow that north. It's wrong. And I just was like, no, this is right. This is my compass. It is pointing me in the right direction.
It's really remarkable, because I think that to many people, they hear the word spirituality and they think of it in deeply religious terms. Spirituality is something out there.
Yep.
You go out there to a spiritual house. You read some scripture out there. And it's interesting, because to you, and I resonate with this deeply, spirituality is really a deep inner journey.
Yes.
It's literally, you're going into the temple within.
Yes.
Finding the God that lives within that temple.
Yes.
Finding the language, finding the rituals, finding the mechanisms that truly make you the very best version of you in this world, right?
Exactly.
And that's really what it was for you.
Yeah. It was all an internal journey. So much of it, some of it looked a little external, because I did go to a shaman, I did go and get readings from other people, but everything, then I took that from them, whatever the messages were, whatever resonated with me, and then I just absorbed it inside of me, and I went deeper and deeper into the path, and that's what began to heal me.
You and I, in fact, the three of us have been to seminaries, the three of us are ordained. And it's interesting because the three of us as ministers can tell the rest of the world that when you actually read sacred literature, right? When you read the Jewish scriptures, when you read Christian scriptures, when you read the Quran, when you read the Bhagavad Gita, when all of them,
Yep.
spirituality is all about that inner journey.
All of it.
Right?
100,000%.
All the prophets,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It was a deep inner journey. It wasn't about acceptance out there
Nope.
or rituals out there. It was
Yeah.
something they were experiencing deeply intimate to themselves.
Yeah.
And in many ways, your book invites the reader into that journey.
I hope that that's what they get from that. And I hope that's where it takes them into a deeper internal journey of their own, because that's the truth of all of everything. Exactly right there. Exactly. All the religions, they lead to that internal journey. And, you know, we studied so many of those religions in seminary. We're interfaith ministers, not just one tradition. And the core I found at the end of each section of different religions was we all believe the same dang things. It's just we call it different things, but all of it is at its core the inner journey. When people got off track in those religions, it's because they were doing the external journey.
Right.
My parents are off track in a way because they're focused on the external journey, not their internal journey of how they can grow and change and evolve. They're just like, oh, let's help all these people over here, you know, like that might make us get into heaven better or whatever. And so I think, yeah, I mean, that's my big hope, is that people take the stuff from my book, whether it's my stories or the practices and journaling and meditations and the things that I've given them, and find their own compass again, find their own guidance system to get back in touch. And again, like you said, that's all an internal journey. It's not something outside of them that they're going to find.
I have a very dear friend of mine who is Christian, and a very, very intense Christian. And I love that she always says, I find that I am at my best when I am trying to simply be the Christ within. When I am being the Christ within,
Yeah.
I am truly at my best. When I am busy trying to be a good Christian,
That's a whole nother game.
I'm playing some other, I'm doing something that doesn't feel is right.
Yeah.
Speak to me, what is spiritual intimacy?
Well, I started to realize in a lot of my relationships that I wanted something deeper with people, and it wasn't necessarily about having romantic relationships. I mean, I think we all often seek those out as sort of a societal thing, like look for this. But I think there's depth in so many different areas that don't have to be about just the romantic aspect of things. So I tried to sort of set that aside in ways and look for, what did I have in those younger years with a lot of those other people that I was in church and community with? It was like this shared intimacy of, here's, you know, even though I was hiding who I was, there was a level of shared intimacy of, here's my deepest fears. Here's like what I want to grow into. Here's like what I think of God. Here's what, you know, all of these things. And so I think when I lost the church, I set that aside and was like, I don't want to be close to anybody like ever again. You know, I really kind of like put a stopper on it. But as I began to open up to new people in my life, I began to realize what I missed was that spiritual intimacy, the intimacy of, you know, I hate how's the weather? What's going on at work? I hate those kinds of conversations, you know, like bless your heart. That's my entire relationship with my parents is, you know, those very surface level. I mean, I would sit for hours and have a conversation about, like, what did you learn in therapy this week? How are you applying it to your life? What kind of changes? Like, what's that dream that you had? And how can we analyze that and look at it to use it as a tool to grow? Like, so I think for me, spiritual intimacy has been that depth of relationship, that it isn't about just these, you know, sort of casual passing relationships that we have where, you know, I spent so much of my 20s and some of my 30s, like we all did, out drinking in bars and smoking weed with people and doing all of that stuff where, you know, I remember I got towards the end of smoking weed, and once I was at this party, it wasn't even a party, it was just like a bunch of people all hanging out, who I ended up in this group of people that I didn't even know most of them, but we all smoked weed. So somehow we were like all at this group. We would not have been friends outside of this. Like maybe 2 or 3 people I would have been. And one woman starts talking about doing some pretty intense drugs on the weekend to like clean her house or something. And all of a sudden I was like, where am I? You know, and it was like I had lost that connection of that intimacy of, this is the stuff that really matters to me. Now I'm just like hanging out and just talking about nonsense and just getting high. And that was those spaces where I knew, whoa, this is not me. You know, I'm not following like my guidance system. And it took, you know, the getting sober to get to that place where I realized, okay, now I have to get back in touch with who I am outside of what my parents were, outside of everything else sort of before this time and space. So I don't know if that answers your question,
It
but
certainly does. It most certainly does.
Just to emphasize this point more, Alex, I'm sort of wondering if there's like a right or wrong way to do this. Like if you're a person who is seeking spiritual intimacy, who's maybe questioning your faith because the religion you were brought up in doesn't support who you are on the inside and who you want to become, you know, that can be a really scary time as it was for you. So, you know, how do we tell people to just go on and do it?
Definitely. This is my favorite example that I've been using with people, and it's that asking yourself the question, what if I can't get it wrong? And I try to use the idea of like the apps for your maps on your phone. So, you know, we drove here from New Jersey. We just put United Palace in, and we know that even if there's a slowdown in traffic or an accident, if we get off the road, it will just reroute us. Mm-hmm. You'll still get to the United Palace. It might not be the way you thought you were going to get there, but you'll still get there. Mm-hmm. And so I've really been trying to encourage people, and living it my own self is just reminding yourself, you can't get it wrong. You can't get it wrong. It's just the app, and it's going to reroute you. And if I have to get off and take a 3-hour detour, that's okay, because I'm still going to get to where I'm going. Like our guidance system, that God within, knows how to get you to the end point. It knows how to get you there. It's just about trusting that even if it looks like a detour, even if it looks like a scenic route, you're still going to get to where you're going. You can't get it wrong. And that's not what we're taught. We're taught you can definitely get it wrong, right? I mean, there's a lot of wrong ways to do it, and there's one right way, you know, for so many of us. And that's revolutionary to say, what if you can't get it wrong?
And what's interesting is, and again, this is something that is so deeply intimate to me, is when you realize that, you begin to value your entire life.
Definitely.
Right? You don't devalue any aspect of your life.
Yeah.
And this is not, I don't want to, by saying this, I do not want to demean or devalue the extent of the suffering and pain that some members of our community feel every single day.
Definitely.
I mean, some folks in our lives, some of us sitting up here, have gone through some real horror.
Yeah.
Some real horror in our lives. And yet, sitting here from where I am, I know that I will not devalue even those horrors in my life.
Yes.
That they all led here.
Yes.
And I think that's the brilliance of your message, which is that it doesn't matter what you're going through, what you've been through. You don't devalue it. Don't devalue yourself. But realize that you are more than that.
Yeah.
You can transcend that. You can learn from that. And at some point that pain will become part of your gift to the world.
Definitely.
It doesn't mean that you should have gone through that pain, because you shouldn't have. But it means that you have the power to transform it into something else.
Definitely. It
right?
can become a tool, you know, especially once you know, but don't get me wrong. I did the years of work validating my experience, saying with therapists and things like, what you went through, that sucked. That was terrible. It shouldn't have happened. It's important for us to be validated. We can't just jump to the space of oh, this is a tool now. You know, nobody does that. Nobody gets to that space. But it's important to find those steps along the way that you can get yourself validated, whether it's through a friend, through a therapist, through even yourself. You can validate yourself and your experience. But recognizing that you can hold on to the hope and the knowing that it will become a tool. You can use it later. Right. To help you grow and expand. And then you can start to grow into this capacity where you start to see things coming as, oh, that's going to be a tool. That's going to be a tool for me to use. And I could see it as a loss, or I could see it as something bad or wrong. But instead, I could just see it neutrally as this is a tool that's going to help me to grow and expand myself. And that's sort of feels miraculous when you get to that space, when you can start to see things as a tool that's helping you grow, as opposed to, you know, that you are always a victim of the situations and everything.
I'm wondering, Alex, let's say everyone who's hearing this, here's your story and here's all the personal shares you have, goes and does the work, goes and does their internal work, goes to therapy, faces some difficult things, finds their community, embraces who they are, realizes they're infinitely bigger than anything they could have imagined. Like, how might that affect the world?
I mean, frankly, it would change the whole world. I mean, I think the healing the broken world, that would just be, I think we would see ripple effects out throughout society. I mean, even if in smaller groups it started to happen here and there, and I do think we're seeing that already. I do think that people are doing this work, and I think we would just start to ripple out. And it might not always be that we see the tons of the change. And that's the thing, is like when you plant a tree, you're planting the tree for the shade for your, for your children and their children. And we have to realize that the work we do is going to heal. I believe it heals forward and backwards. I believe it heals our ancestors and those who came before us. And I believe it heals those who will come after us. And that's part of the knowing too, is that we want to do this work so that, we are evolving this place and this space back to our true knowing and our true essence of ourselves, as opposed to, keeping going with just the ego and the ideas behind that. We have an opportunity to go with source, with spirit, and to go that route. And that's what would change everything for sure.
And what I love about what you're saying is, we have access to work on ourselves, to question
Exactly.
what we're thinking and feeling. And so when somebody says, especially children who want to change the world and want to make the world a better place, it's like it feels like so out of reach. It feels so far away.
Yep.
And really it starts with within.
Inside. Yeah. I mean, it's great and wonderful for us to do external things out in the world. I mean, I definitely think we should feed starving people and house people and yes, let's all keep doing all of that work. But we also have to do the work inside of us, because the biggest awakening I had was realizing that thing I mentioned earlier, where if I want someone else to behave somehow differently, I'm no different than them. If I just decide I have all the right answers and you don't, I am again no different. The key is finding a neutrality, just a balance in things, to not judge things as good or bad, but to just see it as the space of, who knows? I don't know. And that's one of my other favorite practices that I use in the book. And I actually just did this recently, and it was like hilarious how it worked. But one of the things I ask people to do is sit with something that's bothering you, sit with something that you've been struggling with, and literally meditate and say, I don't know. I don't know. And I have you go and do it for a few minutes saying, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. It sounds silly and repetitive. But the other day, I was struggling with something. I needed to get something done before the end of the year. I needed to have it done. It was like I had all these parts and I had to get it done. It had to be done before December 31st. I literally even tried to drive to this place to try to get the people to do it. There was like no one even there that day. It was ridiculous. I was just trying to force it. I needed it to look exactly how I needed it to look. The next morning, I had to drive to an appointment, and I was driving in the car, and all of a sudden, I heard my small inner voice say, I don't know. And I was like, oh, right. So for 30 minutes, I'm just driving. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I must have looked like a madman in the car. And I don't know. I kid you not. I stop and I'm listening then, not talking, not trying to figure it out, just sitting in the I don't know. Then the phone rang and the person said, I'm FedExing it to you tonight. And I laughed my butt off because I was like, oh my God, this was exactly the thing. I was trying to force it. I was trying to do it exactly how I needed it to look and be. And that's not how it works. Just, I don't know. And then let the universe answer the question, because we have like a little field mouse view. We can't see anything. We're like a snake crawling on the ground. We don't have a lot of view. But there is a much bigger energy within us that sees, like from the eagle's view, who can see all of it and has great vision and hearing and can really figure things out. And we don't have that. So we have to tap into that and get out of the ego, I know, and say, I don't know.
Alex, there are a lot of persons that are going to be watching this program, and some of them will be young members of our LGBTQI community.
Yes.
Who are themselves right now in the midst of some of these challenges.
Definitely.
And this pain and this suffering. which has been significantly expanded in these past few years, where the queer community, and frankly, in particular, the trans community,
Yeah,
has become the focus of so much hate
definitely,
and so much ugliness.
definitely.
Knowing that these eyes are on you now, these ears are open to your message, what would you like to say to those young persons?
One of the biggest things I learned was you can never convince someone else of something. And all the fighting and arguing with people like that I especially see on social media, people bickering back and forth on a Facebook post or on a Twitter, like you're never going to convince someone through that form of discussion to be on your side and be like, oh, it's okay, you're trans. It's just, I've never seen that happen in all the years that I've even participated in those kinds of arguments and things. Trust me, I've been there. But what I found is if you get to a point where you can be face to face with people, where you can safely have discussions with people, and you can sort of get around the ideas of, like, oh, you have to be okay with me being trans. A great idea is to try to like end around with someone and say, oh, well, what are some of your values? To try to find out what the person values. And it might be something like, how do you feel about underdogs? And well, oh, I think underdogs, I have a soft spot in my heart for underdogs. That's interesting because trans people are like some of the biggest underdogs, or people of color, some of the biggest, like trying to get underneath to what people actually value and who they are, as opposed to just these talking points and talking heads of, and they want us to also argue. Like, I tell this great story in my book. My brother will love that I'm continually sharing this story, but my brother and I always were like the biggest bickerers. Like we always just like back and forth, back and forth. And one time years ago now, we're like riding in the car somewhere. His kids are in the car. Everyone, we're just back and forth, back and forth, bickering. All of a sudden, I thought of do the opposite. And I just shut my mouth. I just stopped talking. And he, for a few more minutes, and all of a sudden, he got quiet too. And he looked at me and he goes, well, that's no fun anymore. And it was like in that moment, I realized, oh, he liked the baiting and the back and forth and the energy of that. And so I just stopped doing that, and it just stopped. And so I think I try to apply that to social media. If I see someone, you're a woman, oh, that's original. I've never heard that before. But I just don't even respond. I just say, like, have a great day and go on with it, or don't respond at all. And I think that's the catch, is not getting, we end up down these rabbit holes with people of like, we're going to just fight this out to the death. And it's just like, yeah, it will be to the death of you, probably. It will destroy you if you keep going down these paths. And so for me, that's the best. Don't read the comments. Don't engage with people who want to argue with a two-dimensional avatar on your screen, because you're not a human to them. You're even more dehumanized than they actually are trying to dehumanize LGBTQ people. And so don't fall for it. It's like and again, what work can you do inside of you? So if that lady told me, you're a woman, you're not a man, then what I can do is I can look at what that makes me feel. Like, what comes up for me around that? Oh, do I still have fears that I'm not man enough? Yeah, okay, so I can look at that. I can heal that. I can't fix, Barbara on the internet and make her feel something different. But I can, again, go back inside. The spirituality, all of this is an internal job. The healing of this world is an internal job. And we just have to try to do that in the midst of, people screaming at the top of their lungs, basically wanting to say, you should die. That's the biggest feat of love when we can actually just love ourselves in the midst of that and choose to not say, oh, I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to go there. And for some people, they might feel like they still have to fight. I've had to sort of give up my fighting days. Like, it served me already, but now it doesn't let me thrive anymore. Like, it's like my addiction to weed. I had to give it up. It's not a tool for me that helps me anymore. So I don't fight with people anymore. I don't argue over things as best I can, because I just find I feel really terrible when I do it, and I don't feel better.
I've never argued on internet. I don't do social media because, to your point, I don't think that there's any value in that. I do believe that exactly as you said, doing the inner work is absolutely essential. And to the extent that it's possible, organize.
Exactly.
You know,
Yep.
organize.
Come together.
Come together with other members of the community. Take social action, political action, because the struggle continues and the
Right.
struggle is of value.
Right.
It's just that the struggle online is
No,
fake. It's
exactly.
virtual. It's not real.
Exactly.
But the struggle that's happening on the streets,
Is
that's
real.
happening in our legislatures, it's happening in the courtroom, that's real.
Right.
And to the extent that we can support that,
Right.
then we're supporting something that's very real.
Right.
And
that
the other
takes
stuff
coming
is
together.
absolutely correct.
Because that's been the problem we've made is we've all tried to individually, the LGBTQ groups, people of color individually, women, we've all gone at it our own self. And the truth is, if we all came together, there are way more of us than the white, straight, cis man that we think rules our world and that has told us they rule our world. And that's it too. It's always about coming back together. It takes a village. It's a community. Like, Dr. Edith Eger, she was in the Holocaust. She wrote this amazing book, The Choice. And the one thing I heard her speak at a synagogue in Flagstaff, and the one thing she said is the people who came together are the ones who survived. And that always stuck in my brain. She said, if you tried to go it alone, you didn't make it. And that's why she survived. On the last day when they were being walked out of the camp, she had like a broken back, but her friends were carrying her because they said, if you stop, we'll just shoot you. Like, this will be the end of it. And that has stuck with me. And that's the truth is the more we come together, the more we're in communion with each other and see that, look, this whole thing of anti-transness, they'll come for everyone. They won't just
Absolutely
come for
correct.
trans people. They already have come for Roe v. Wade. You know, like they will come for women next.
Absolutely.
They're trying to make you be like you can't dress in drag, which ultimately would say women can't wear pants.
Correct.
If we get so, the irony is it looks like it's this one targeted group, which is what all of these atrocities throughout history have looked like. It won't stop there.
Completely
It never
correct.
does. And that's why we have to come together. We have to realize that we are inextricably connected.
Right.
And that's where our power lies, in joining together.
Agreed. Alex, a lot of folks are watching this and listening to this and asking themselves, how can I get more of Alex?
All right.
So let me ask you, how can someone who is participating in this program learn a little bit more about you, from you?
You bet. So you can visit my website. I'm sure they'll put it up, but it's just alexreegan.com. Right now, this week, if you go, you're going to find the information about my book. Pre-orders, like I said, are starting this week, and that's going to come out on May 2nd. You can book me I work one-on-one with people. I work workshops, groups. I do speaking engagements at spiritual centers, churches, businesses, all of the above. So yeah, you can definitely reach out to me. I have a contact us form. You can email me, and I'd love to chat and find more people who want to do this kind of work.
And you can also pre-order What Needs to Be Said. That's the other...
Thank you. Yeah, I could say that you could pre-order my book. That might not be a bad idea.
Excellent.
And I have some fun pre-order bonuses, which if you order a few extra copies, you get a free session with me. If you order 10 copies, you actually get a session with me and any of your friends. One of your friends you can get a free session with as well.
Fantastic.
So I'm trying to do some things to reach out and help people more however I can.
That's fantastic, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex, I'm hoping just as we close here, you'll leave us with an invitation, an intention, maybe even a prayer, whatever you feel called to share with the audience and the listeners.
You bet. I mean, I think I want to come back to the reminder of the doing the opposite, the I don't know, and you can't get it wrong. I think those three work so well, and they have worked so well in my life, is that if you remind yourself, what if I can't get it wrong? And if you're in suffering, if something doesn't feel good, try doing the opposite. I mean, I know that sounds silly and simple, but it really can work. It really works because it redirects the energy. It redirects the focus of things. And then just when you get to a place where you're trying to just, punch the square into the peg, and it has to be this way, even with all this stuff, the political stuff, where it has to be this way, a good question to ask ourselves is, I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but I know someone who does, and that's the deeper me, the God within, my higher self. And so being willing to look deeper, go within, do that inner pathway and that inner work to find the answers outside of the sort of ego rambling mind who thinks it has all the answers, which we clearly know it doesn't.
The beauty about your book is that you actually you provide a lot of beautiful spiritual exercises that
Thank
your
you.
readers can undertake that again are transformative.
Thank you.
And I think that's fantastic. Reverend Alex Reegan, dear friend and dear brother, thank you so much for this. This has been magnificent.
Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for having me here. You know, I love you, my brother. And Renee, I'm so glad to always work with you. And I'm so glad we got to do it in person. And I hope we get to do a lot more together.
Yes, me too. I'm so grateful for your story and your willingness and your vulnerability to share it with all of us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Reverend Renee, I also want to thank you because you really have kept this program, Open Heart Conversation, you've kept it going through all kinds of changes and transformations. It's been your energy, your vision, and your commitment to this program that's kept it on the air. And on behalf of all the viewers and listeners and the entire Open Heart family, thank you, our executive producer and our heart and soul.
Thank you, Jose.
Really appreciate it. And to all our viewers and listeners, thank you once again for participating in Open Heart Conversations. Until next time, take care.